Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon to you from Hamburg, Germany. We are starting it off today with talking about the somewhat difficult subject of how to turn around a financially struggling organization. It's a bit of a difficult one. This webinar, however, is going to be focused on the pragmatic ways of solving this difficult problem. And I hope that you are not in the situation, but if you do find in a situation where you could just do with more funds or where there's just never enough money for those essential functions, then I hope you find a good idea in this short webinar. Upon popular request, we are having two kinds of webinars at MZN. The first one is a longer, donor views, quarterly outlooks, and more strategic focus. They take a full 40 to 50 minutes. This is the other section. This is the short webinar where I'm trying to get through this in 10 to 15, or 10 is unrealistic, 15 to 20 minutes to serve as a small information teaser and a mini learning session so that you can take away from that what you need to take away from, because our mission, of course, here is to build better non-profit organizations. And we do that by securing funds and developing strategies. And sometimes these strategies, of course, involve turning around a financially struggling organization. My name again is Chris. I'm the managing director at MZN International. My colleague isn't around today. She's otherwise engaged right now. Most of our staff is based on all these countries you see down here. So hopefully one near you at somewhere. And of course, if you have any questions about what we are covering here today, feel free to ask either directly in the Q&A or what seems to be more common, because this is a touchy subject, feel free to reach out to myself or my colleagues afterwards. The slides will be shared with you in a day or two, so you don't need to copy, paste, and frantically write down things. You can relax with that coffee or tea and soak up what you need. All right, let's get in. Our talking points today are sort of three ways. So looking at the challenge we have, the ways to think about it differently, and how it takes courage to think really differently, and then give you concretely 3 steps to sort of turn it around. And starting straight up, I want to say that all this has been designed from organizations we have helped to turn things around financially. Now, where we mention an organization's name, we've received the advance written permission to do so. In all other cases, the lessons we've learned are anonymized, and we would never share any of that detail with anybody, of course. Let's dive in. There is a ton of change and disruption, and it's only going to get worse. Our friends at Interaction have done this wonderful survey. They're doing a recent one now as well, and a more recent one as well. But basically, the point is that a good 80% of CEOs and leaders at nonprofit organizations said that the external operating environment is changing so much. We will have to transform our business model. We are over-reliant on institutional donors. We need the capacity to flex upwards and flex downwards much faster. These would be just the top 3 of the major changes that are happening all the time. So it feels like the business environment, the operating environment, and the civic space is changing much faster and much more violently than it has done in the previous decade. And therefore, the mindset we need to navigate and turn this around is a very different one from maybe our normal things. We've observed leaders in difficult strategic turnarounds or financial turnarounds, and sometimes both, who really succeeded. And they succeeded by deploying a very different mindset. They have really confronted the facts, no apologies, just the hard truth. And they could be, look, there's just not enough money, there's just not enough time, and there's not enough trust in this turnaround prospect or the process. They've said this very openly, and that open, upfront acknowledgement of difficult situations has caused problems and has caused shocked some of the staff, but also it has created a trust in that the things that are difficult to say are finally being put on the table. The other thing we've noticed from leaders in the civic space, in the NGO space, are the fact that they called for a shared sacrifice with clear goals and timing, and they've called for this urgently. And in practice, this means that said, look, we are going to take a salary haircut, or we are having to get rid of a program area, we have to close a country office, and we are going through a tightening of belts, but this process will only take 3 to 4 to 5 months' time. So they've said so very clearly. And the effect this has is that that clarity and that acknowledgement put the organization and the staff motivation behind that leader. And finally, we've noticed leaders who are successful at turnarounds in being very clear about the difference about what they need to adapt and what they need to transform. So adaptation is we are changing, we are adapting towards how things are done. And a transformation is what is being done. Obviously, the latter goes to the mission, the theory of change, the core of the NGO. Much harder, and therefore much more important to be very upfront about it. If there's a part in your mission that is just no longer fundable or fundraisable for, and you may need to change that, then acknowledging that sooner rather than later is really important. Adaptation, we're much more used to. Even that is difficult, though. Maybe we need to change how things are done. Maybe we need to get rid of an office. Maybe we need to digitalize far faster than we need to in order to achieve cost benefit. Maybe we need to partially merge with another organization because doing it alone is no longer effective or efficient. So these are the sort of 3 straits that we observed, or I observed in the last 20 odd years, where leaders went through a difficult phase with their organization that they've been successful at. They were honest, they asked for the sacrifice, and they knew the difference between adaptation and transformation. And importantly, one more word, they didn't sell a transformation as an adaptation. Again, they were very upfront about it. So when you've decided that it's really time to change the how and not the what, then you now know that you need to achieve this financial turnaround. The organization needs to change as well. And that makes an NGO very, very nervous, but it can take solace in the fact that the need and the reason for existing may not go away. So these successful leaders that I've just mentioned, they are really acknowledging very clearly that the business model and the way they do a business changes, not what they do, or maybe it just evolves towards a more innovative way. They are finding newer and better ways to do the same, and or changing what they do. So that difference, once again, super important. It's not something that many people focus on when they are facing a financial crisis, but yet we find that is a key differentiator in a successful turnaround. So 3 steps, as I promised, in this short webinar. Number 1, let's plan. Even though the intent is to immediately act, we need to plan for this. And plan basically consists of 3 steps here. Number 1 is getting aware of the shocks, the trends, and the changing environment. So what has caused this? You probably know, but getting it down on paper will make this whole plan so much easier. Number 2 is identifying the opportunity costs, or in this case, the costs of doing nothing. If we don't change, if we think this is a phase, or if we don't acknowledge the change, what will it cost us? And finally, what do we know? I'm certain there are areas which we don't know. Certainly there are areas of things where we are unsecure. So maybe they are listing out what we know, what we don't know about future developments and future trends, and what we need to know and can know in a simple list is a really good plan as well for the turnaround. Then number two is to, yes, not act again, but actually think. Taking the time, taking a week or two before reacting to outside of the day-to-day business, to think about how we need to change our organization, to muster up how we develop the leadership courage to do what needs to be done, how to question and dive deep on our business model sustainability, asking fundamental questions. And this doesn't take ages, it takes about a week or so. Asking, is our business model actually sustainable? Can we sustain this way of doing business? Which means, is this funding stream, how is our income developing? And what are our reserves doing? If we have less than 6 month reserves, that's clearly something we're not doing right. How can we strengthen that? And the answer cannot just be diversification. That's usually not enough. Oops, where's the next slide? Here we go. Here's the next slide. And then, yes, act. So make that clear sacrifice, those clear deadlines, and those clear metrics. Clarity in the restructuring and change plan is absolutely essential. Even though you might be tempted to not give committing deadlines and metrics and success metrics to your team, it is so important to do so because everybody in your organization, including your donors, most of all your beneficiaries and your users and your staff, will make a sacrifice here. So being very clear about what that is, absolutely important, even if it at some point has to delay. Everybody will understand. But this open-ended restructuring and vague change, that's not going to be successful. Okay, I'm already running out of time. I appreciate that. This is a short webinar after all, but it is worth having a quick look at what financial distress actually means. By and large, financial distress means sort of any situation where the income in the long term is no longer covering the expenses. So this is the green line is the income here, the red line is the expenses. And immediate distress is, of course, caused by a sudden shock, a withdrawal of a donor, a change in income, or the inability to operate. But there's also this structural distress where slowly but surely our surplus margins are degenerating and you can just see where the road goes. Now, it's worthwhile remembering that at least in the short term, costs are fixed. There's very few costs you can immediately go down. However, income often is not, as indicated by this wobbly line here. Income can behave very violently up and down. So it makes total sense that when income goes down, the costs are also being adjusted. But even if you do this very fast, you will not be able to cut the cost fast enough in order to bring the cost down below the expenses. And that is also not the way to save an NGO. If your problem is a lack of project acquisition or a lack of business development or not enough grants coming in, then saving on that will not save you. So there's a time where you need to dive into your reserves, unfortunately. The reason that costs are stepped rather than flowing, it's a really important reason in any restructuring scenario, are that certain costs can only be reduced by notice. You can't make a staff redundant immediately. It takes 3-4 months. You can't quit that office lease immediately. Maybe you have a 1-year waiting period until you can terminate the lease or sell the building. Same thing even with online subscriptions. These things have a notice period. So you can reduce it, but probably not in a matter of days. So the financial distress means anything from strained financial reserves, not having enough money, sort of demoralized management, concerned employees, struggling beneficiaries, and often, unfortunately, increased scrutiny from the donor. And those challenges are then felt across the entire range of teams, finance, the HR, policy, communications, programs. And all of these need to be tied together into a coherent turnaround plan that executes very clearly based on KPIs that I've just mentioned and is based on thorough thinking, or in this case, evaluation. If you don't do this from the bottom up, you will end up with an intuitive plan that will continuously have to change and erode confidence in leaders ability to turn around even more. So I think taking that time against all the pressures of actually evaluating or thinking and actually establishing what would be a good success here is absolutely important in any turnaround situation. The evaluation, as I've mentioned before, can consist of a financial analysis, looking at the activities in the programs that are underperforming, that are not doing well. We find a lot of turnaround situations where a small number of activities is insufficient and they eat up reserves, or a small number of operations are just eating away the reserves. And obviously also a personnel review. Over time, we've noticed that program staff, in particular, can become core staff. So they've been added on to the staff body by a grant 3, 4, 5 years ago. That grant is no longer there, but they have continued staying in the team. They're very much needed, but that means departments have a tendency to swell and don't contract again when things go down. That obviously are some of the reasons why we found many of our NGOs we work with have a structural imbalance in their income and expenses. It needs to be swift, this evaluation process, but very robust. So getting some external help here is often much required. Then the final thing on the evaluation is engagement. Please do not do this in isolation. Asking staff, beneficiaries, donors, management, and trustees about their view, their experiences, what they think is absolutely essential, because it saves you time finding out yourself. Don't do it just reading the documents. Then yes, we want to establish proper control. So we want to create daily or at least weekly cash flow reports, track all the spending, approve expenses before being spent, switch to lower cost vendors, evaluate staffing needs, make those changes that are important, possibly sourcing things to lower salary organizations, digitalization with AI. We can do a lot more here as well. And reviewing those programs which don't offer the support and are not aligned with any strategy that we are supporting anymore. That control, taking control, that without changing anything yet, is another important step. And then finally, we want to plan for something better. So tactics that have worked well for us before is forming an advisory board that helps and guide and help through this rebuilding of the organization, bringing the employees in there, and really taking that opportunity to collaboratively and participatory develop a strategic plan, so that we can invest where we need to, if we can, and so that the reserves are going up again after some time. We've done this in a matter of days to months, depending on the size of the organization and the courage by leaders, really. But again, the thing I would take away here is the fact that participation is just so important. And that's it. Stayed within the 20 minutes time limit of today. So that's very good. I've got a couple of announcements as well. We do have a brand new online training opportunity. If you can't afford time-wise or financially to join our physical training courses, you can now do so online. There's some interesting sections here in writing proposals as well, how to write proposals with AI and things like that. They're really important to get right and how to do it. And then obviously today seminar was, or short seminar was very much about building the sustainable income. And there's now a course out there as well that you can sign up to. The next cohort is starting, I believe, in later this month and in July. I hope you find that interesting and avail yourself of that. Finally, we also have a few webinars coming up. So the impact investment webinar is later this month, which you can register right now if you want to add that to your funding stream. That's certainly a fast growing one. Fantastic. Now, this is, as I mentioned twice before, a series of short webinars, which are supposed to stay only half an hour. I hope you that I stayed within that time. I just about did. If there are any questions, I can't see any online right now, although I've got 3 emails already. I'll get back to those who emailed me tomorrow. If there's anybody who wants to put any questions into the Q&A right now, please do it. If there's something you'd rather discuss in person, then by all means, please reach out to me directly, and I'll get back to you, or my colleagues will get back to you personally as well. And until next time, I hope to see you at the Impact Investment webinar on the 19th. And until then, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining this short webinar, and see you soon.